It's 91 minutes. It's M-rated, beautifully shot, magnificently shot. It's a sensitive story about love, loss and yearning. And we're talking about small town, rural Australia, 1971. Leo, played by Mark Leonard Winter, is a steelworker. His wife has just left him without explanation. One day she just packed up all the things and disappeared. All that remains is one red dress, lipstick and 2 hairbrushes. Leo has 2 young primary school aged children, daughter Maudie, played by Minnie Lizakevitz, and son Jack, Freddie Lizakevitz. Although hoping that his wife will return, this isn't the first time that she's gone away, Leo knows deep down that this is different. She won't. He doesn't say much, and his father, who's a farmer, his name's Jim, played by Robert Menzies, scarred by his wartime experience and by the loss of his wife at the age of 31, speaks even less. In fact, Jim has all but shut himself off from the world. Leo has to plead with him to spend time with his grandchildren. Leo has flashbacks about his wife and his mother, and he's not above self-harm. His mate at the factory is an Italian immigrant called Tony, Fabio Motta, who likewise has experienced loss. He recognises that Leo's struggling. He can't cook, and he suggests that Leo engage his sister Maria, Silvia Colocca, to provide some stability for the kids. She readily accepts and becomes a godsend for the children and for Leo. The key, in my opinion, to Little Tornadoes is connection. It's a story about ghosts and how one navigates the minefield known as life. And it's been written by the author of The Slap, Christos Tsiolkas, along with the film's director, Aaron Wilson, who did the fine movie Canopy about 8 or 9 years ago. What to unpack here? Immigration, post-war resettlement, urbanisation, anti-Vietnam War protests, the women's lib movement, they all play a part in the change that's taking place. So, Jacqui, words may be in short supply, but the silences speak volumes.
Yes, Alex, the silences, I guess, speak volumes if you know what they're trying to say and if they develop through the film. You mentioned a whole lot of issues that this film touches on, and I think it does, touch on them, but it doesn't take us anywhere with it except to say this is why the father is the way he is, and a flashback to the war, a jungle war scene, which I thought was quite ineffective. It did. I mean, it completely. It was completely out of character with the film, and it simply, it was a bit obvious, if you like. I thought the narration was really odd, half English, half Italian, and I was halfway through the film before I really worked out who was speaking.
But that's the whole point. I mean, there was that air of mystery about it. Well,
you might say mystery. I might say it was very irritating because it was this kind of disembodied narration by some person you hadn't seen in the film. You didn't know who they were. Were they reflecting back on, 2 months ago or, 30 years ago? I wanted to know what was the role of this person.
Did you think, Jacqui, when you initially heard the narration, that it was the wife that had departed? Because that's what No, you did not. You did initially. No, but there we go.
I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing I was most disappointed with was the acting. I thought, okay, they were meant to hold silences, but there was a lot of silence, and I don't think that they brought out that we couldn't read what the silence was about enough. I think it needed to develop that a lot further.
So you didn't appreciate Mark Leonard Winter, the sort of smouldering intensity to him, and the joie de vivre about Silvia Colocca?
Well, I don't know about smouldering intensity, Alex. He slumped his shoulders a whole lot and leaned against the kitchen cupboard. And we kind of had to interpret that, but without any more cues. We didn't have much background as to what caused the issue in the marriage, so we didn't know where his mind was going, if you like. Nothing of that came out. And it wasn't only him. I think the young Tony, the co-worker at the factory, who befriends him, or they kind of have a weird kind of,
it's a bromance.
Thump the shoulder. Well, it wasn't a bromance at all, Alex. It was thump the shoulder and walk away kind of friendship that might have gotten started. I thought he was way too pretty for what his role was supposed to be. I thought that was very distracting for me anyway, probably for you so much. But no, I didn't mean it like that. I just didn't think he fitted right. And overall, that was... look, you mentioned... well, maybe I'll mention, once again, we can say the Australian landscapes come up on screen as, breathtaking. And that is whether it's a sweeping drone down the river with the cockatoos, or whether it's a look at just a wheat field at night that, being harvested. Just magnificent. But it didn't connect with the story. We were in a steel factory, we were in a kitchen, and then we were out in this, magnificent Australiana. But nothing brought it all together for me.
Really? Wow. Gee, I have a totally different view. I mean, I thought the shot selection by the cinematographer Stefan Duskio, who did The Dry, the music choices, the news bites used to provide context, I thought all of that was really impressive, Dave.
Yeah, I agree. I thought this was a real throwback to the films that Australian filmmakers like Bill Masoulos and Jim Stamatakos were making in the early 2000s. And it's interesting because that's when I first discovered Mark Leonard Winter as an actor. He was actually in a movie called Further We Search, which was directed by Darius Davis. And that was a very similar film. There was a lot of long silences, a lot of shots of actors looking morose, standing in front of different areas of Melbourne. And I thought this film captured that really, really well. I'm a little bit like Jacqui, though. Sometimes the narration did annoy me because I had to switch from watching the film to reading subtitles, but I did like that air of mystery about who was talking, and there was a few times when I was wondering whether it was his wife/ex-wife, whether it was his mother. There was so many bits in there that I was trying to put the jigsaw pieces together, but I thought it looked sensational. But I still wonder about these kinds of films, like what kind of audience is this film going to attract, even though for me personally I loved it.
Sensitive, new age sensitive blokes and women.
Yeah, but how many? Yeah, yeah.
No, not at all, Alex. Not at all.
Some women. What about you, Peter?
The film, I spoke to Aaron Wilson last year because the film Little Tornadoes was presented at the Melbourne International Film Festival, and I had a long chat to him about what he was hoping the audience would get out of the film. And I really enjoyed the film because it gives us a slice of life of history of the early 70s in Australia with the immigrant experience and with the dislocation that so many men who were arriving in Australia, as well as people who were already in Australia, men already in Australia, are trying to survive a sort of a harsh sort of environment to some extent, finding work, finding connections, finding relationships. I thought this was a very effective film. And it's interesting how Aaron, who directed this film, filmed this around, or started filming this around the same time as he was filming Canopy. So he was trying to almost make a dual level cinema experience where the two sort of are connected in some respects. Look, I really enjoyed Little Tornadoes because of its subtle exploration of the way men were coping with a new environment and with a difficult environment in Australia in the early 70s. And we should be making more films about our Australian history and about our social events and our relationships, etc. Because if this was a film that came from Europe, we would be fawning all over it, saying how wonderful it is as a subtle exploration of people and relationships and men. And yet, because it's an Australian film, there tends to be a bit of a cringe factor attached to it. I think it's a very effective film.
I totally agree. I really appreciated the performances. I think the adults are required to take a less is more approach. And I talked about the intensity of Mark Leonard Winter, the joie de vivre about Sylvia Kolocka. The children, the Lizarkowitzes, they seemed quite natural as well. I mean, it's a fine and telling Australian film that is unfolding with conviction and clout and should be seen. And I agree with you, Peter. I think we should see more of these sorts of movies. I think it's one of the better Australian movies, probably one of the best Australian movies I've seen for a long, long time. And it's 91 minutes in time. Isn't that wonderful? In fact, this week there have been a few movies that are around about the 90-minute mark or less. More of those, please, folks, please. So let's start with tallest to shortest. And so the tallest will probably be you and I, Peter. What's your score out of 10?
8 out of 10.
Mm-hmm. I'm also giving it an 8 out of 10, maybe pushing up to an 8.5. So, Dave.
I'm giving it 8 out of 10, and I think what Peter said there is right. There are so many brilliant Australian films out there that people don't go and see because of that stigma. So go and support a little Aussie film. It would be a great experience for you.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Now, Jacqueline, I need a drum roll here. This is about the best I can do. Go for it.
Well, I don't have a problem. In fact, I agree with the Australianness of it, and I agree with making these films. I'm just looking at this as walking into the cinema and watching a film, and I don't think it had the development that I would have liked. And so I'm awfully sorry. I've given it a 5.5 out of 10.
Now, when you say development, just give me a little bit more. What were you looking for that wasn't there?
I wanted to see more character come out of the husband, the father of the two children. Exactly that.
Okay.
Some development in his character, some change, some growth, something. A slice of life doesn't necessarily have to always have this, but in this situation, I think if we're presenting this case and then putting a couple of pieces, well, really only one small change in his life, which is the arrival or the presence of the Italian woman into his life, very briefly. I would like to see, some impact of that to some degree. I just didn't see it in the character. Sorry.
Well, no, that everybody's got their own opinion. Even if you're wrong, it's okay. It's fine, Jacqui. Now, what I was going to say is we've talked about an Italian connection